I am finally going to have an answer for those tag questions where it's like, what's one really popular book that you just didn't like? So I guess I got that going for me. Hi, my name is Adriana and this is my reading wrap-up for the month of August. So August was my birthday month. I am now 30 years old, which is very exciting and fun. I took an incredible trip to Italy with my family. That is why I haven't been posting very much the last month or so. There's been a lot going on, but I also did quite a bit of reading. So let's jump in, let's look at my stats, let's look at some books and see what's going on. Starting with my quick stats up here, we have 10 books read, totaling to 1,748 pages. The average page length was 249.7 pages. And then I listened to 36.75 hours worth of audiobooks. And then my physical TBR is sitting at 45. Let me double check that real quick. That doesn't seem right. Oh yeah. That is right. We're sitting at 45. So then jumping into graphs, my genre breakdown, pretty even across a bunch of different stuff. Fantasy, mystery thriller, nonfiction, romance, sci-fi, literary fiction. We're just bouncing around everywhere, just having a ball. I read all adult or general audience. As far as series standings, most of what I read was standalone. I read 2 books that were continuations of a series. My format, most of what I read this month was digital, just because like I said, I was on a trip and honestly most of my reading is digital because it's easier for me. Yeah, I guess I only had 2 physical, which were paperback, and then 3 audiobooks and 5 ebooks. As far as where I sourced my books from, 6 of them came from the library, 2 of them I had purchased like in this year, and 2 of them were from the publisher. I think specifically these ones were NetGalley. My ratings was all 3s or 5s, or did not rate, because that's only 6 in total. Did I not rate a lot of stuff? Oh yeah. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. I chose not to rate a lot of stuff. I will get into that in the book by book. Page length, I read a lot of shorties this month. I will probably get into this a little bit more later, but I was trying to fill out a bingo board. So yeah, read a lot of shorties to try to fill in some specific prompts. Year published, as per usual, most of what I read was a little bit newer, following 2020 or later, but I actually had a couple 2015 to 2019. Again, I was kind of reading outside of what I would normally read, just because I was trying to fulfill some prompts. So you can see that also here in the where I heard about it graph. 3 of the books I specifically sought out for a readathon or this bingo board that I'm doing. 3 of them were in a series or from an author I'd previously read from. 1 was a friend recommendation. 1 I found just browsing. 1 I heard about from BookTube, and 1 was an ARC from NetGalley. So that is all the stats and graphs. So let's get into let's do bingos next. So I talked about this in a previous video, but Powell's, the big bookstore in Portland, was doing this really fun summer reading bingo challenge that I think ran from like June to, I can't remember when exactly in June it started, but it ran from like sometime in June to the end of August. So there was 25 prompts on the board. For the first bingo you get a $5 coupon, a sticker, and an entry in a raffle. If you black out the board, you get a couple more entries in the raffle, and you get another $5 off coupon and a sticker and a pin, and then you can fill out the board up to 3 times. I am not going to read 75 books in a summer. I'm sure some people did. That is not my life. But I did black out the board once, so I got 2 of these little $5 off coupons from that, and then 2 stickers and a pin that I don't know where the pin is. It's somewhere. And then I was able to do 1 more bingo on a second board, so I got another one of these $5 offs and another sticker. So I am flush with Powell's summer reading stickers if anybody feels like they need one. But yeah, that was really fun to be able to like squeeze that out, and especially like the last 2 books on my most recent bingo I like finished while I was like on the plane back from Italy, and it was like August 28th, like we were in crunch time, so it was just kind of fun to get that all figured out the way it's supposed to be. But yeah, so I managed to black out a bingo board and then get 1 more bingo. So that was my summer Powell's reading challenge. Exciting stuff. I probably also read some stuff that would like go for my Reddit bingo, but I might just make a separate video on that because that one's a little more involved, and we're not close to the end of that yet because I think that goes till March of 25, so I still got some time. But now, book by book breakdown. So the first book I finished in August was specifically for I guess it was a mixture. It was partially for my library's bingo card. It also fit for the Powell's bingo card. But that was Postcolonial Love Poem by Natalie Diaz. This is a collection of kind of essays and poems and just kind of just general collection of different bits and bobs of literature that Natalie Diaz put together as an Indigenous woman in the United States. This is one of the ones I chose not to rate just because like I just personally don't really know how to rate poems and I guess essay collections because it's not my normal reading sphere, and it just feels too personal, like to really put my enjoyment as any sort of rating system on it, because that's not really what it's there for, versus like a novel that is meant to be enjoyed by an audience. I don't know if that made any sense, but that's where we're at. But I did have like some really strong reactions to a lot of the poems and essays in this collection, which I think means it's good on some level. Like I did have a lot of feelings about it, which was not enjoyable, but like felt important, I guess. So I think my favorite poems were Catching Copper and America Arithmetic. Both of those focused a lot on like systematic violence against Indigenous peoples of the United States. And I think just living in the time frame we are now, it just seems very pertinent. This collection was published in 2020, and I think you can kind of feel some of that anxiety as well, because I don't know how quickly it got out or like what month in 2020 it came out, but obviously that was a very tumultuous time in the US, and you can feel a lot of that in a lot of these stories. And not like the entire book is about like violence and everything else. There was another really powerful essay on The First Water is the Body is what it's called, and it's like the human relationship to bodies of water on the land, so like rivers and lakes and seas, and like how we as humans relate to them and how we relate to water within our own bodies. And like it was just really interesting and cool. So it's not all like violence, but there is a lot of it is angry and about violence, but there's also some really other not violent stuff in there too. I don't know, I am babbling because I don't feel confident in my ability to speak to this book, but I would recommend it and I did enjoy it, but I just chose not to rate it. The next book I read was The Pairing by Casey McQuiston. Obviously a very big temperature swing from postcolonial love poem. This is a romance, kind of like a summer European vibes romance. I did get this as an audiobook arc from NetGalley, so I will have a vlog out about it at some point. So I probably won't speak to it too much here, but I really enjoyed it. I gave it 5 stars. Casey McQuiston I love their romance books. Like Casey McQuiston just wins the romance genre for me personally. Everything they put down on the page for adult romance is just pure gold to me. The next book I read was How to Be Successful Without Hurting Men's Feelings. This book, expectations were different than what the book actually delivered. Obviously from the title, I knew it was going to be cheeky, I knew it was going to be silly, but like the author is a real life girl boss. Like she was a director at Google, like she was a real like corporate girl boss, whatever you want to call it. So I thought that this was going to have like some sincere kind of like business memoir advice for other women working in a corporate culture dominated by men, but it was just like purely like satire, tongue-in-cheek, which is like fine if I had known that's like what I was going to be expecting, but I went in and thought, like, thinking it was going to be something that it wasn't. So I chose not to rate this just because my expectations were different than what it actually was. But like, if you're just looking for like something silly to like pass time on an afternoon, and especially if you are a woman who works in a corporate setting that's dominated by men, like, you will relate to a lot of it, and a lot of it will be really funny and fun. The next book I finished was kind of the opposite problem of the first one, where again, my expectations were not met, but my expectations were that this was going to be a really funny and like tongue-in-cheek book. And it was actually a lot more sincere and sad than I thought it was gonna be. And that was Unreliable Narrator by Aparna Nancherla. I think the first thing I saw her in was the TV show Corporate on Comedy Central, and she is hysterical in that show. If you have not watched that show, you definitely need to go figure out how to watch it because it is so funny, and she is so funny in it. And she is like kind of a stand-up comedian type, like just very focused on comedy in her career. So when I saw that she had written like a memoir or collection of essays or whatever you want to call it, I was just expecting it to be funny. And a lot of it is focused on like her own struggles with like mental health and body image and working in Hollywood. And I guess like Z-Ways is also kind of that, but Z-Ways was like really funny at the same time. This one, there was not a lot of funny to be had. It was mostly straight memoir. So again, I chose not to rate this just because it was so deeply personal to the author that like it felt weird rating it on any sort of scale. But I don't know if I would necessarily rate this one unless like you're just looking for specifically for someone else like exploring their own anxieties and like struggles with depression and body image and everything else. Yeah, this is, again, not what I was expecting. Like, I think objectively it is good. Like, I think Aparna is a very talented writer. Like, she has written for like TV and stuff before, so she knows like how to construct a good sentence, how to build a good story, like how to keep you interested. But just the subject matter was very heavy for what I thought it was gonna be. And then the next book I read, I also chose not to rate, but I think this will be the last one of the non-rated books. But that was The Venus Factor. This is a collection of short stories. I think it was edited in the 70s, but a lot of the stories are from like the 40s. And it kind of, its shtick is, it is a sci-fi short story collection from all female authors, thus The Venus Factor. And it's kind of funny, like, you know, in the 70s, like, they said it was sci-fi because I think the horror genre didn't really exist as a genre yet, but like most of these stories I would classify more as like horror or paranormal than I would like sci-fi. Like, honestly, a lot of these I would even say are more like fantasy because of that like paranormal element. Like, I didn't really get sci-fi. Like, I was expecting more like space escapades and like sexy aliens. I don't know. Like, I guess I don't really, again, my expectations for all of the books I picked up this month were just so vastly wild than like what was delivered to me. And that's probably a me problem and probably also a marketing publishing problem that we just weren't meshing on what things were. I found this book in a used bookstore, and I think what really drew me in is it has the only science fiction story written by Agatha Christie. Again, not science fiction in like the modern way we think about science fiction. It is definitely more like horror. So like it's I don't know. It seems like the book is making a big deal that like Agatha Christie like wrote this story that's so different from a mystery thriller, but to me like the jump from mystery thriller to horror is like this big. Like the jump from mystery thriller to sci-fi is a little bit bigger. So like to me it's not that impressive that like I've read some Agatha Christie. Like this short story was not that different from what she was writing in her mystery thrillers. A lot of these stories were originally written in the 40s, so it's definitely got kind of a different way of speaking to it. Some of the stories I like better than others, like as you find in short story collections. Being that I read this almost 3 weeks ago and I don't really remember what any of them were about, probably speaks to how much I enjoyed it. But this one I chose not to rate just because it's a short story collection of a bunch of different authors, so it doesn't really make sense on how you're supposed to rate that, because each story should probably be rated as its own unique thing. And that was too much effort for me to try to figure out on my spreadsheet. So, would I recommend this collection? Probably not. Do I really want to go and read from any of these authors? No, not really. Like, none of these stories like captivated me enough that I really wanted to discover more of their work. I'm just not someone who really loves old style writing. I'm a modern girly. I love modern stories. The next book I finished was This Is How You Lose the Time War, and controversial opinion, I did not like it. Like, I came into this, I was so excited. Like, I was gonna read this back in May for the Galactic-thon, and this was gonna be like my pick for the final prompt of 5-star expectation. Like, I thought I was going to adore this based on like everything like I had heard about it and all the hype it had, and it wasn't for me. And like maybe this book would have been better for me had I like not ever heard anything about it and could kind of discover a lot of the stuff about it on my own. But like I knew what was gonna happen, because I mean this book is tiny. Like, just telling you the premise of it like is the plot essentially, and like the plot is not really there because like if you haven't heard about this book, like you're probably living under a rock, because it was huge on BookTube. It is about like these two beings on opposite sides of this time war, and they leave each other like these notes in like these really crazy ways. And like that was one of my big issues with the book, is that like I never really understood what was going on, like because it's so short, like we don't really get any explanation of like how these notes work. It's just like one of the beings will like eat a flower and like suddenly like they have this note. I don't know. It didn't make sense to me. The prose is kind of purple. I'm not a big fan of like flowery writing. And for being two separate authors, like I assume the way this was like put together is that like one author wrote one character, like, I don't know, maybe just by the colors of the names, like Amal El Motar wrote for blue and Max Gladstone wrote for red. But like when we were jumping from chapter to chapter, I could not tell red and blue apart. Like they had a very similar voice to me, which like seems super strange for it being two different authors. But maybe because it was two different authors, they were trying really hard to like make it seamless between chapters. But like, why would you need to do that? It's two different, I don't know. So this book was not for me. I gave it 3 stars, but after sitting on it, I might have to go down to 2. Like, scared to initially rate it 2 stars because like it is such a beloved book, but like it's not beloved to me. So you might be watching it live here and now. I'm dropping my rating to 2 stars. It is short though. It's got that going for it. You can get through it quickly. You just won't have any idea what's going on. And then the next book I finished was actually an audiobook of The Lager Queen of Minnesota. This I was reading for a project of like reading my friends' faves. Don't really want to spoil that project, but like I'm not gonna be done with that project for a minute. So I'm gonna have to spoil that project a little bit. I really enjoyed it. It's really, really good. It's so good. I think that's all I really want to say about it. It is like a Midwest story, kind of multi-generational Midwest story of these two sisters like living their lives that go very different directions, and we get to kind of see how their lives unfold. Obviously there's a tie-in of beer, which is like really fun. I don't know, it takes place like over like 60 years, I think, almost. So it's really good. Like this book is kind of what I wanted Lessons in Chemistry to be. And I wish this book would have gotten the hype that Lessons in Chemistry did, because this one actually holds up to that expectation So, I highly recommend. The next book I finished was The Palace of Eros. This was another NetGalley book, so I will have a vlog coming out on it at some point. This is a retelling of the Psyche and Eros myth, where Psyche is this really beautiful woman who all of the people in her village start saying that she is more beautiful than the goddess Aphrodite. Aphrodite gets upset about that and decides to punish her by having her son Eros, or better known as his Roman name Cupid. Although in this book, Eros / Cupid is gender bent and she's a she. So Aphrodite sends her child, male in the original canon or female in this book, to make Psyche fall in love with like a really horrible, awful man to punish Psyche for being pretty, you know. Just regular Greek mythology things. When Eros sees her, they end up falling in love with her and decide to, instead of making Psyche fall in love with a horrible monster, whisk her away to a hidden palace where they will like live together, but Psyche can only see Eros at night because Eros is trying to keep their relationship secret. And yeah, there's like some more stuff. Obviously, we get to like things get blown up, blah, blah, blah. Not like actually blown up, but like their secret comes out, Aphrodite freaks out, things happen, it's a whole thing. This book, as far as a retelling, I think does a really, really good job. Like, this isn't the author's first novel, I believe, but it may be like their first novel with like this kind of like more structured narrative style. It seems like some of their other stuff might have been more experimental. So to have something like a Greek mythology retelling where it is more of like a rigid narrative structure, the authors seem to kind of struggle with the pacing of it. And like the middle section of the book is so slow. Like so painfully slow. The last section of the book is so rushed and it just feels like really disjointed and weird because I really wish we could have dedicated like a big chunk of the middle section to like pad out the last section, because I wanted more of the last section. And maybe not even more, but just to like slow it down and make it match pacing wise. But yeah, I think overall it is an enjoyable book, and I just gave it like an average 3-star rating because it's a good retelling. It has some issues. I like what the author does with exploring like kind of a non-binary identity of Eros, especially with the author being non-binary themselves. It just makes for a really interesting way to interpret Greek mythology. And then I also read another James Rowlands. This is number 9, so this was a reread for me. I think this is my favorite of the reread so far. And honestly, I think it's better than a lot of his newer stuff, as far as stuff that I can remember off the top of my head. The science is like so much more science-y. The history is like so much more involved. The newer ones just feel like a lot more action-y and at the detriment of the science and history and character relationships that we get in, I guess, these kind of more middle ones. Honestly, I think this is like a great book just like on its own as a standalone, and if I am recommending the series to people, I might tell them to start with this one because James Rowlands has worked through a lot of his like early 2000s weird writing of like women and other cultures. It's not perfect by any means, but like it's a lot better. It's still written by a white guy, but like it's a lot better than it was. The balance and blending of like an insane like cutting edge science topic like dark energy and an ancient mystery like where is Genghis Khan's body buried, like that doesn't seem like it should have anything to do with each other, but like he melds it together and like it makes it really feel like this could be a real thing. I just don't feel like we get that in some of his newer releases. I like this book a lot. And I gave it 5 stars. Like, I give all of his 5 stars, but this is the 5-stariest 5-star. Definitely recommend this one. I know a lot of my friends have, like, thought about maybe dipping their toes into the James Rowlands pool. I would recommend this one if you want to get into Sigma Force. And then finally, I ended the month in a binge of Yours Truly. I literally binged this entire book on my plane ride back from Italy, and it is a great pastime for 20 hours of traveling. This is the sequel to Part of Your World by Abby Jimenez, and this one is just like, it's got so much heart in it. Like, I think even more so than Part of Your World. You could truly feel that like the author poured like her entire heart and soul into this book, and it's mentioned a little bit in the acknowledgements as well. And I think it was also helped for me by the audiobook narrators. They both did a really, really good job. And it's just like, it's just such a sweet book, and we have like social anxiety representation that, like, for my personal experience with social anxiety, is like very well written and very true to life. Like, I related to Jacob so much, like so ridiculously much, and I just thought it was really, really good, and I really enjoyed it. And I guess this was another book I read for that project where I'm reading my friend's faves. So there will be a video coming out with like some more thoughts. Because I binged it on a plane, it's not like check-ins throughout the book, but I like spend a good chunk of time talking about my thoughts of the book right after I finished it. So I liked it. I highly, highly recommend. A great romance. So even though the month started off a little rough, I finished very strong and had a great time on my birthday trip, and bought myself a ton of books, and just had an overall very good month. So hoping September is the same, and wishing you a happy month ahead. So thanks so much for watching, and I'll catch you on the next video.